Question for all my millennial parents out there. How are y'all affording children?
Hi, I'm a millennial mom and I have 4 kids, and I want to try to answer this question from kind of 2 points of view. 1, how are people doing it? How do they actually afford it? Logistically, how do they make it work? And 2, why is it so difficult? First and foremost, I think there's several ways people make it work. 1, they get paid really well. He acknowledged that. You have to make a lot of money to be able to afford childcare these days. I fall into that bucket with my partner. We make enough money to allow us to pay for childcare and remain a dual income home that can still pay for groceries. We are very privileged in that way, but that is how we are able to do it. Then I think another way people afford it is they rely on family and essentially the unpaid labor of grandmas and aunts, etc., to watch their children. People will relocate to be able to take advantage of free childcare, essentially in the form of family members watching their children. This is incredibly common. It's the number one preferred way to access childcare in our country because it's really unaffordable otherwise. Another way people are doing it, and this way is a bit controversial because they'll work from home with their children. And oftentimes their job doesn't know they're doing that. And so they're either off camera or they're not on calls, but they're working from home while also providing childcare. So there's this huge movement for remote workers where they're just working with their kids because they have no other option and can't afford to live without the income. Why is it so expensive? Well, it's so expensive for a million reasons, but they just compound. First and foremost, giving birth is expensive. The second you leave the hospital, you have a massive bill. Second, you don't have access to paid leave. Most of us don't have access to paid leave. Some people don't have access to unpaid leave. So people are taking sick time, PTO time, short-term disability, whatever it might be, and or just unpaid time to be with their children after having them. And the problem with this is oftentimes it leads to people just leaving the workforce altogether. So not only are they taking a short-term hit financially, they are taking long-term career and financial hits as well. If you're able to remain in the workforce as a dual income home, then you typically need childcare if you're not going to try and work with the children. Childcare is incredibly expensive. It's currently a childcare crisis in our country. We don't have enough childcare, so people cannot actually even find daycare or nannies. There are childcare deserts in our country. And for those of us who can find childcare, it is incredibly expensive. Here in the state of Massachusetts, it's one of the highest states for the cost of childcare. It's about $20,000 a year per child to attend a daycare. Then, when your kids finally age out of that high cost time of being in full-time daycare, they enter public schools. But for me and for many, kindergarten's not always free. School ends at 3 o'clock, meaning you need after-school care, which ranges from $500 to $800 a month. Then you're paying for the bus. At least in my town, I have to pay for the bus. Then you've got summer camps, school vacation weeks. Summer camp alone is typically $350 a week minimum per child. So the cost doesn't disappear. It just changes as they get older. And so all of these, compounded with the fact that the cost of living is just rising, the cost of housing prices, the cost of groceries, it's incredibly difficult. So if you don't fall into the bucket of working with your kid while you're at home, having families support you in the form of providing childcare and unpaid labor essentially, and or being wealthy enough to afford daycare, then it is incredibly difficult to make the decision to have children. And I empathize with everybody who's in this position because our country could and should do more to allow our country to have systems and supports for families and children to thrive. But instead, this is where we are.